Hello, everybody. This is Brian Corio from the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment. I'm part of the Hazardous Materials and Waste Management Division. With me here today is Shana Baker, who is our work lead, as well as Shannon Bauman, who is our communications liaison, who will be managing the presentation today for our stakeholder meeting. So today we're going to go over some proposed changes to the waste tire program. I will go over the agenda, talk a little bit about some of the housekeeping. Shana will go over some of the things that we're going to change as far as the regulations go for registrations, and I'll talk a little bit about the end user program. Shannon, next slide. And so again, I'm Brian Gaborio. As part of the agenda, we'll do an explanation of the rules and the process that we're going through. We'll talk a little bit about the timeline today. We'll do a review of each section that we're going to be proposing as far as changing. We'll discuss, and then at the end, we'll discuss the need if we need to have another stakeholder meeting, and then allow for any final comments. Just to know, our team, again, a lot of you know me, I've been around forever. And as well as Shana Baker, who is our waste tire work leader. Wolf Cray is our unit leader. We also have Anna Maylett and Cindy Smith, who are two of our inspectors. Lisa Jeffrey, that handles the waste tire fee analysis. And again, Shannon Bauman, who is our community involvement specialist for the division. And she is helping us with the presentation today. Next slide. Just a little bit about how you can participate. If you do want to ask a question, we ask you to either put it in the chat or you can raise your hand by clicking the button. If you're joining us just by the phone today, you need to press *9 to raise your hand or press *6 to mute or unmute. We ask that everyone not ask any questions until we're completely through all the proposed regulations. There'll be plenty of time at the end to ask and answer any questions that you might have. We are recording today's meeting, and all the meeting materials will be available on our website, and that is the URL there. Next slide. A little bit about the rulemaking process. The department is proposing changes to the per ton rates for the waste tire end user rebate program and registration timelines for waste tire haulers and mobile processors. There is a form that we have to turn in every year. It's called an EO5, and it's done to alert local governmental agencies of the process to make sure they're aware and want to participate. Any of the changes that we talk about today would not take effect until January 1st if they are approved by the Solid Hazard Waste Commission. Stakeholders will have an opportunity today to comment on the proposed changes, and you will also have a opportunity to submit questions or comments on the proposed changes all the way up to the meeting of the Solid Hazard Waste Commission that will be held on November 15th. So if you're not able to answer or ask any questions today, or you think of something later, there are ways that you can still get your questions submitted. Next slide. A little bit about the timeline. We're having our stakeholder meeting today. If we feel that it's necessary to have a second one, we have a tentative date of August 30th. Based on how questions are answered today or any changes or anything that's suggested, we will submit a final draft to the Secretary of State's office for public notice by the end of September. Again, we will present the proposed rules to the Solid Hazard Waste Commission, and that is a public hearing. So if you want to attend, you certainly can. Any proposed changes would not take effect prior to January 1st of 2023. And all the current regulations would remain in place as they are now until that date. Next slide. And so I'm going to have Shana talk a little bit about the proposed changes for the registration of haulers and mobile processors. So take it away, Shana.
Okay, thanks, Brian. So I'm going to talk about our proposed changes for registration. And this is specifically in regards to registration renewals for waste tire haulers and mobile waste tire processors. So we'll start with the waste tire haulers first. So this is section 10.3.2. That's the section of the regulations for waste tire haulers registration, which also includes renewals. So currently, waste tire haulers have to renew their hauler registration every year. So we are proposing that this would be changed from every year to every odd numbered year. So instead of renewing your hauler registration every year, you would do it every 2 years. And the reason for this, again, is it would reduce the department's administrative burden. Since we do have over 220 haulers, so there's a lot of work for doing this every year. And then this was also reduce the paperwork for haulers to do this every year. Also, as part of the regulation changes, we wanted to put in there when we are canceling a waste tire certificate registration. So we already do this already, but we wanted this codified in the regulations. So we already had that if a hauler no longer hauls waste tires, their registration would be canceled. But also if the hauler fails to submit their renewal, which is form WT1H, then the registration as a hauler would be canceled. Also, you have to submit, the haulers have to submit an annual report. And if this isn't submitted, then your hauler registration could also be canceled. Shannon, we're ready for the next slide. So as part of this change to the regulations, we would actually have to update the decals. And while we were going through the regulations, we noticed that temporary decals were missing from the regulations in regards to when they're valid through. So as you can see in the blue, the change would be adding in temporary decals. And then clarifying in the section 10.3.3 for hauler decals that you need to submit a renewal application, and we put in the form number in there. And then we did indicate the section that this responds to for the registration renewal, which is 10.3.2F. Next slide. So it's the same as for waste tire haulers. Mobile waste tire processors are a type of, they also have to renew. So to be consistent with the haulers, mobile waste tire processors would also have their registration go from every year to every odd numbered year. So that would be the change for 10.7.3, which is the mobile waste tire processors registration requirements. And then like the waste tire hauler section regarding canceling the registration for the mobile waste tire processor, it's pretty similar. So adding to that, if a mobile processor no longer mobilely process waste tires, we would cancel their registration. Also, if they did fail to submit the waste tire processing renewal, if they didn't submit the annual report, and for mobile waste tire processors, since they have to maintain financial assurance, if this wasn't maintained, then we could also cancel their registration. So again, we wanted to codify everything in blue under that section 10.7.3. We added that in. Like I said, we were already pretty much doing that, but we wanted that codified in the regulations. Next slide. And again, very similar. This is the waste tire hauler decal section. So again, temporary decals would only be valid until the 15th. And again, that would be April 15th. So we just put in temporary decals. So that would change the section in 10.3.3, which again goes along with the decal section. Next slide. And again, 10.7.4 is the section for the decal for mobile processors. So we just codified that in there in regards putting in the renewal application, including the form for the mobile processor for the renewal, and indicating the section of 10.7.3H. Next slide. I mean, again, I kind of touched upon this when I started, but again, the reasons for the proposed changes for 10.3 for hauler registration and 10.7 for mobile waste tire processor. Again, reducing paper administrative work for waste tire for the, not only for the division, but again, for waste tire haulers, mobile processors. And again, we're going to be clarifying that the certificate of registration as a waste tire hauler or a mobile process will be canceled. Again, I did go over that in regards to the sections we were going to be changing. And then again, we wanted to include temporary decals that they also would not be issued unless the hauler application is submitted. So next slide. And this section 10.11 waste tire fee administration, you can see 3020 and it's 1043 was we striked it out and put 1403. This is because we had an incorrect reference to the Colorado revised statute. So we would be updating this to match the statute. And I believe Brian, again, yes. And so that's the incorrect statutory section referenced. So I believe I'm going to pass it off to Brian so he can talk about the end user fund.
Thanks, Shannon. So in this change, 10.12.2, this applies to what we use to confirm the number of residents per county for the waste tire hauler rebate. And so we use the website that's done by the Colorado Department of Local Affairs. They do a population count every year. And I use that information to determine whether or not a county is considered rural to qualify for the hauling of waste tires for the program. And so recently I was in there and they have changed their URL that we had in the regulations. They did some upgrades. And we decided that instead of putting the URL in the regulations, we would put a much more general statement that we would be referring to their website to get this information. That way, if we have another change in the URL down the road, we don't have to go back into the regulation and change it again. Next slide. And again, the URL address recently changed. And again, we're using general text just to avoid having to update this regulation in the future if the URL address changed again. So really nothing's changed as far as qualifications. So who's eligible or what counties are eligible or not to be hauled from. It's just basically, we're just changing the wording in case the URL is changed in the future. Next slide. So every year we have to go to the commissioners to set the per ton quarterly rebate rate. It's built into the statute. And so the purpose of the revised regulations is to update the waste tire and user quarterly rebate amount for calendar year 2023 based on the criteria. Next slide. And just as a review, the statute calls out 3 tiers of eligibility. If you're in tier 1 and you're using either chrome rubber or tire dry fuel, you're considered to get the full rebate. Tier 2 is molded products or rubber mulch. You get 50% of the full rebate or what tier 1 is set at. And then tier 3 for end use of alternative daily cover, tire bale end uses, or using tire drive aggregate that meets ASTM standard D6270, you get 25% of the full rebate set for tier 1. And then the waste tire hauler rebate is set at the tier 3 rate, unless the tier 3 rate is higher than $25. And then it's it's set at $25 as a maximum. Next slide. And so we are proposing that we keep the per ton rates the same in 2023 as they are for this year. Tier 1 is $80 per ton. Tier 2 is $40 per ton. Tier 3 is $20 per ton. And the waste tire hauler is $20 per ton as well. Next slide. Just to give you a perspective so far, we finished first quarter of 2022, 11,847 tons were approved, totaling a little over $700,000 for the quarter. We are currently working on quarter number 2. Applications that have been received total 14,541 tons, and it's estimated that we'll pay somewhere in the range of $850,000. Again, we're still in the process here, so those numbers are not final, but I just want to give a perspective on what we've seen so far for this year based on the need for ton rates. Next slide. What are the reasons we're not proposing changes to the per ton rates? We have limited data so far. As I just showed you, we've only completed 1 quarter of rebates. Typically takes about 60 days from the time that the quarter ends in order for us to review, verify compliance status, and determine what the payouts will be. And so based on having our meeting today, we just don't have enough data to say that, hey, these rates are too high or too low going into 2023. So we have decided to leave them at that rate at this time. We do have enough funding to support this through this year, and we believe through next year as well, based on what we collect and based on what the current fund balance is. We also want to try to maintain the fund balances for when the waste tire fee rate does change in year 2024. The statute right now says that the waste tire fee will be set at 55 cents per replacement tire. Today it's set at $1.25. And so we want to try to maintain a balance going into that year, because we know that we're going to have to change that that waste tire fee will be automatically adjusted. So funding will drop down. And so we'll need to adjust that based on the needs of our division and our program to continue with all the programs that we do as far as grants and enforcement, as well as to maintain funding for the end user fund. We also didn't want to raise the per ton rates because we felt that they're at a good rate right now where we're not overpaying for the tire dry products. This was a program that was never meant to pay fully for the use of these products. The reason for the per ton rate is to make them more competitive with non-tire products. And so we feel raising them any higher would cause that, us to overfund some of these things that we've done in the past prior to the program going to a tiering structure. And so we just feel at this time that we'll just keep it the per ton rates as where they are and maintain those through 2023. Next slide. And so those are all the proposed regulation changes that we have at this time. If you have questions, I ask you to either raise your hand or put it in the chat, and Shannon will share the questions with us. And so I'll give you guys an opportunity if you want to do that at this point. And Shannon, just let me know if something comes in or if someone has a question for either Shannon and I.
Yeah, nothing so far. And just a reminder, the raise hand function is in the reactions button if anybody's looking for it. Great.
Yeah,
I don't see anything.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit about the proposed statement of basis and purpose. Shannon, can you bring that up to the group? Thank you. This is also posted on our website. This is something that accompanies the regulation changes. It does a little more explanation as to why we are proposing these changes. It's something that, after this meeting is over, that we'll actually add to and make it available on our website. And of course, it'll be something that will be part of promulgation of the rules at the commissioners meeting in November. And so I don't know if anyone has any questions on this particular documentation at this point. And again, just click the reactions button or put it in the chat box. Okay. No questions right now. Shannon, can we go back to the presentation? Thank you. And let's go to the next slide. Well, that's all we have to propose. So, my feeling is that we will not have that meeting at the end of the month. This will be our only stakeholder meeting at this time. And so we are working on changes to the non-compliance policy for the waste tire end users fund. This is the policy that we use to make determination based on an applicant's eligibility if they are out of compliance with environmental rules and regulations. And so we are making some changes to that. Our intention would be, once it's had an internal review, that we make it available to everyone to review. And I'm really kind of talking to the waste tire end user folks that are on the meeting today that are impacted by this. And so we will make it available on our website. We'll announce when it's there and give you an opportunity to make comments or suggestions once it's posted. So I'm hoping in the next few weeks it will be available for everyone. And so that's that. And then final comments. Again, we will proceed with the rules as written at this point. You will have an opportunity to continue to submit questions either to Shana and I or to the commissioners. Next slide. And so again, our meeting materials are going to be where they are today on that URL. We will also have the recording available after today's meeting. If you have an email that you want to have questions about the registration proposals, you can send it to Shana Baker. If you have questions about anything that perceives to the Waste Tire End Users Fund, you can send questions to me. And again, there will be a time when, once we turn in our materials to the Secretary of State's office, comments will then be forwarded to the Solid and Hazardous Waste Commission. And you can do those questions or comments all the way up to the meeting on November 15th. And of course, that's a public meeting. And so you can show up in person. I don't know, I think it'll be in person, I'm not sure. If it's not, it will definitely be on Zoom, and you'll have an opportunity to participate and ask questions at that time on anything that we've reviewed today. And so I'm going to go ahead and end the meeting now. I appreciate everyone joining us today. And again, any questions, please submit them to either Shana and I or the commissioners. So thanks for your participation. I hope everyone has a great day.